At a family party, my son tried to stop me from going into the living room. When I finally walked in, I was shocked. I saw a young woman hugging my husband tightly, her hand slipping into his pocket. He said, "Oh, come on, I've been doing this for years, right under your nose. You didn't even notice." My son added, "Yes, Mom, everybody knows. She's like our second mom." I left the room silently to grab one thing. When I came back, I unleashed the most brutal revenge they never saw coming. My name is Helen, and I want to tell you a story. It's my story. For the longest time, I couldn't even say these words out loud, but I think it's time. It's about a 40-year marriage, a family I built from the ground up, and how it all came crashing down in the most unbelievable way. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. George and I had been married for 40 years. 40 years. That's a lifetime, isn't it? We raised two wonderful children, Brenda and Carl, and we were blessed with two granddaughters, Joyce and Carol. We had the house, the picket fence, the whole American dream, or so I thought. After George retired from his management position and I left my part-time job at the library, our lives were supposed to slow down, to settle into that comfortable, golden years rhythm you see in the magazines. But life isn't a magazine. For the last decade or so, I'd been battling severe rheumatoid arthritis. Some days were better than others. On good days, I could manage my garden, attend my book club, and cook George his favorite pot roast. On bad days, just holding a coffee mug felt like gripping a handful of broken glass. The pain was a constant, unwelcome guest in our home, and it had, over time, changed the landscape of our marriage. The physical intimacy we once shared had become a casualty of the disease. It was a quiet sadness between us, something we acknowledged but rarely spoke of. I thought we had an understanding, a partnership that went deeper than that. I thought he, of all people, understood my struggle. George was still healthy, thank God. He was a vibrant man, full of energy. He played tennis twice a week, had a standing Friday night poker game with his buddies, and was always busy with some project in the garage. I was happy for him, truly. I never wanted my condition to hold him back. But lately, a new kind of distance had crept in. It wasn't just the separate hobbies, it was something in his eyes. He seemed restless, impatient. The signs were small at first, easy to dismiss. He started spending more time on his phone, tilting the screen away whenever I walked into the room. His poker nights started ending later and later. Sometimes, he'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. When I'd ask, he'd just wave a hand dismissively. "Oh, that's just Sharon, you know how she hugs everyone." And I'd let it go. What else could I do? To question him felt like admitting that the foundation of our 40-year marriage was cracking. It was easier to pretend I didn't notice. One Tuesday afternoon, I was getting ready for my weekly book club meeting. It was my one real social outlet, a little island of normalcy in my sea of chronic pain. I was looking forward to discussing the latest novel with my friends. Just as I was grabbing my keys, my phone buzzed. It was Margaret, the host. "Helen, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice raspy. "My grandson came down with a terrible flu. We're going to have to cancel today." I felt a pang of disappointment. "Oh, of course, don't you worry about a thing. I hope he feels better soon." We hung up, and I stood in the quiet hallway, the silence of the empty house pressing in on me. George thought I'd be gone for at least another 3 hours. A little idea popped into my head, a nice, quiet afternoon. Maybe I'd surprise him. I could pick up some steaks from the butcher, the good ribeyes he loved, and we could have a nice dinner, just the two of us. It felt like a good plan, a way to bridge that growing distance. I felt a little flicker of hope as I got back in my car and turned towards home, completely unaware that I was driving straight into the wreckage of my life. The drive home was short, only about 10 minutes. I remember the weather was beautiful that day, one of those perfect autumn afternoons where the air is crisp and the leaves are turning brilliant shades of orange and gold. I pulled into our driveway and noticed an unfamiliar car parked down the street. It was a sporty little red convertible, the kind of car a young person would drive. I didn't think much of it. We had new neighbors move in a few houses down. I let myself in through the front door, calling out, "George? Honey, I'm home early." Silence. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Usually, the television would be on in the living room, tuned to some sports channel. But the house was still. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. "George?" I called again, a little louder this time. I walked through the entryway and into the living room. And that's when I saw it. The scene is burned into my memory like a photograph. George was standing by the fireplace. He wasn't alone. A young woman was with him. She couldn't have been more than 30, with long blonde hair and a tight-fitting dress. Her back was to me, but his face was clear. He had his hands on her waist, and he was leaning in, about to kiss her. They froze when they heard me. The woman spun around, her eyes wide with a flicker of panic. George just stared at me. There was no shock on his face. No guilt. Just annoyance. Pure, unadulterated annoyance, as if I were the one who had done something wrong by simply existing in my own home. My purse slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence was deafening. I looked from George to this woman, this stranger in my living room, and back to George. My mind was scrambling, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman found her voice first. I should go," she stammered, grabbing a small purse from the armchair. "Yes," I said, my own voice a hoarse whisper I didn't recognize. "You should." She scurried past me, not making eye contact, and fumbled with the front door before rushing out. I heard the engine of that little red convertible roar to life and then fade down the street. And then it was just the two of us. I turned to face my husband of 40 years. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. "George," I began, my voice trembling. "Who was that?" He sighed, a heavy, put-upon sound, and ran a hand through his hair. He wouldn't even look at me. He walked over to the bar cart and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Her name is Sandra," he said, his back still to me. "Sandra," I repeated the name. It felt foreign and ugly in my mouth. And what was Sandra doing here, George? In our home? He finally turned, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. The look on his face was one I'd never seen before. It was cold, defiant. "Come on, Helen. Don't play dumb. You know what she was doing here." The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. "I know?" I choked out. "I don't know anything. I come home to find you with another woman, and you expect me to, what? Understand?" "Maybe you should," he snapped, his voice rising. "Maybe you should try to understand what it's like for me. You think this is easy? Living like this? We're roommates, Helen. We haven't been husband and wife for years." Every word was a physical blow. He was using my illness, the pain I endured every single day, as an excuse. As a justification for betraying me, for bringing another woman into the sanctuary of our home, the home I had poured my life into. "So this is the solution?" I cried, tears now streaming down my face. "Instead of talking to me, instead of being my partner, you go out and find her? She makes me feel alive, Helen," he shouted. "She's fun. She's not tired all the time. She doesn't complain about her aches and pains." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I felt a sudden, hot flash of rage that burned away the tears. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" I said. Get out, I repeated, my voice now dangerously calm. I don't want you in this house tonight. Go stay with a friend. Go stay with Sandra. I don't care. Just get out of my sight. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. I think he expected me to crumble, to beg. He didn't expect this. Without another word, he slammed his glass down on the bar, grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, and walked out, slamming it shut behind him. And I was left alone in the ruins of my 40-year marriage. I sank onto the sofa, the silence of the house screaming in my ears, and I finally let myself break. I spent that night in a daze. I didn't sleep. I just wandered from room to room, touching the furniture, the photographs on the walls, souvenirs of a life I suddenly wasn't sure was ever real. The next morning, George came back. He didn't apologize. He acted as if nothing had happened, making his morning coffee, reading the newspaper. The silence was a weapon, and he wielded it with expert precision. This went on for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of living with a ghost in my own home. We barely spoke. I felt like I was losing my mind. I thought about calling the kids, Brenda and Carl, but what would I say? Your father is cheating on me? The words felt too shameful to speak. I was paralyzed. Then, the 4th of July arrived. It had always been a huge family holiday for us. A big barbecue in the backyard, all the kids and grandkids over, ending with the town fireworks display. That year, the thought of it filled me with dread. But George insisted. We have to keep up appearances, Helen, he'd said, the one time he'd addressed the situation directly. The family started arriving around noon. Brenda and her husband, Frank, with my granddaughters, Joyce and Carol. Then Carl and his wife, Janice. I put on a brave face, forcing a smile, hugging my grandkids. But I could feel a strange tension in the air. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells around me. After we ate, while I was clearing the table, Brenda came up to me and put a hand on my arm. Mom, she said, her voice serious. We need to talk. All of us. In the living room. A cold knot of fear formed in my stomach. I followed her into the living room, where everyone was gathered. George was sitting in his favorite armchair, looking somber. The kids were arranged on the sofas. It felt staged. It felt like an ambush. I sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. Brenda took a deep breath. Mom, she began, choosing her words carefully. Dad told us what's been going on. I stared at her, stunned into silence. He told them? He had framed the narrative, told his version of the story before I even had a chance to speak. He told us about Sandra, she continued. And about your issues. The fact that you two, well, that you can't be a wife to him in that way anymore. The room started to spin. My issues. They were calling my chronic, debilitating pain my issues. I looked at George, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my son, Carl. He was staring at the floor. So, what is this? I managed to say. An intervention? Are you all here to tell me I'm not doing enough for your father? No, Mom, of course not, Brenda said quickly, though her tone was condescending. We're just saying, you have to be realistic. Dad has needs. And if you can't meet them, isn't it better that he finds a discreet way to take care of them, instead of, getting a divorce and destroying the family? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked around the room, searching for an ally, for just one person who saw the insanity of this. So you all agree with this? You think it's okay for your father to have an affair? Brenda sighed. We're not saying it's okay, Mom. We're just saying it's a practical solution. It doesn't have to affect anyone. He gets what he needs, and the family stays together. It's better for everyone. I turned to my son. Carl? You agree with this? He finally looked up, his face unreadable. It'll help Dad, Mom, he said quietly. He's been miserable. I looked at my daughter-in-law, Janice. She looked deeply uncomfortable. As long as he's discreet, she mumbled, wringing her hands. My last hope was my granddaughters. Joyce and Carol, my sweet girls. They were teenagers, part of a different generation. Maybe they would see it. What about you girls? I asked, my voice pleading. Joyce, the eldest, exchanged a look with her mother, who gave her a slight nod. Well, Grandma, she said hesitantly. A lot of our friends' parents have open relationships. They say it's not a big deal. It's just sex, right? It's just sex. The words echoed in the silent room. My own family, my children and grandchildren, were sitting here, in my home, telling me to accept my husband's infidelity as a matter of practicality. They had sided with him completely. They had chosen his desires over my dignity. In that moment, I had never felt so utterly alone, so completely betrayed. I felt like an old piece of furniture, something they kept around for sentimental reasons but that no longer served a useful purpose. I stood up, my legs shaky. I see, I said, my voice flat. The majority rules. He'll get what he wants. I turned to leave the room, to escape their pitying, judgmental eyes. As I reached the doorway, George called my name. Helen. For a foolish, hopeful second, I thought he might reconsider, that he might see the monstrous thing he had done. I turned back. He looked at me, his face serious. Can I tell Sandra you were just joking about calling the police? It really scared her. The last bit of my heart shattered. I didn't answer. I just walked out of the room, out the back door, and into the yard. A few minutes later, I heard cheering from the living room. I glanced through the window and saw them. My family. They were hugging George, slapping him on the back. They were celebrating their victory. Celebrating the successful negotiation of my surrender. And through the window, I could see my husband, my partner of 40 years, already pulling out his phone, a smile spreading across his face as he called his mistress to tell her the good news. After that day, the 4th of July, a new and terrible kind of normal settled over our house. It was the quiet, polite hell of a marriage that was dead but hadn't yet been buried. The affair was no longer a secret to be hidden, but a fact to be managed. George made no effort to be discreet. I knew that every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, while I was at my physical therapy appointments, Sandra would come over. I knew because I could smell her perfume lingering in the air when I got home. I started finding long blonde hairs on the sofa cushions. Once, I even found an earring, a cheap, glittery thing, tucked down the side of his armchair. I picked it up with 2 fingers, looked at it for a long moment, and then dropped it into the trash can. What was there to say? I had been outvoted. The family treated the situation with a chilling sense of normalcy. When they called, they'd ask, "How are you and Dad doing?" as if nothing had changed. Brenda, in particular, seemed to think she had engineered a brilliant compromise. One afternoon, she stopped by with some groceries for me. As she was putting them away, she said, in a bright, cheerful voice, "You know, Mom, I'm really proud of you." I stopped what I was doing and stared at her. Proud of me? For what? For being so understanding, she said, completely serious. For putting Dad's happiness first. It shows how much you love him, letting him do this. Letting him. The word hung in the air between us. As if I had given my permission. As if this was some generous gift I had bestowed upon him, instead of a betrayal that was gutting me day by day. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest. Brenda, I said, my voice low and steady. This is the last time we will ever speak of this. Ever. Do you understand me? She was taken aback by my tone, but she nodded. Of course, Mom. I get it. It's hard to forget if people keep bringing it up. She had no idea. She thought my problem was a matter of forgetfulness, not a wound that was festering in the heart of our family. I began to withdraw. Not just from George, but from everyone. I became an observer in my own life. I cooked, I cleaned, I went to my appointments. I built a wall around myself, brick by painful brick. On the weekends, George was home. We'd have dinner together, talking about meaningless things, the weather, the news, what the grandkids were up to. He would try to be affectionate sometimes, a hand on my shoulder, a compliment on the meal. It was all a performance, a way for him to soothe his own conscience. I rarely reciprocated. The well of affection I once had for him had run dry. To cope, I started spending entire days away from the house, especially on Saturdays. I told George the first was joining a new art class or volunteering at the hospital. In reality, I would just drive. I'd drive for hours, with no destination in mind. I'd find a quiet diner in a small town I'd never seen before and sit for hours with a cup of coffee, just watching people live their ordinary lives. I'd go to the movies and watch back-to-back films, losing myself in other people's stories because my own had become unbearable. These long absences didn't seem to bother George. In fact, he seemed to prefer it. It gave him an empty house, a free schedule. I knew what was happening while I was gone. The house was his, the bed was his, and Sandra was with him. The thought was a constant, dull ache. But a strange thing began to happen during those long, lonely drives. The pain slowly started to curdle into something else. Something colder, sharper. It was resolve. I realized they all saw me as a weak, frail old woman who had no choice but to accept her fate. They thought my silence was surrender. They were wrong. My silence was me planning. My silence was me biding my time. My silence was me getting ready for war. The months crawled by. The vibrant colors of fall bled into the gray chill of winter. Our house, once filled with the warmth of a long-shared life, now felt like a cold, empty museum. George and I were polite strangers, coexisting in a space that no longer felt like a home. He continued his arrangement with Sandra, and I continued my weekend escapes, fortifying the walls around my heart. Then, Thanksgiving arrived. The holiday I once loved, a day of gratitude and family, now felt like a looming threat. I went through the motions, ordering a turkey, planning the menu. I did it for the grandkids, I told myself. A few days before the holiday, Brenda called. "Hey Mom," she said, her voice overly bright. "Just confirming the plan for Thursday. We'll be over around 1. And hey, Dad had a great idea. He wants to invite a guest." I froze, the phone feeling cold against my ear. "A guest?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Who?" There was a slight hesitation. "Well, it's Sandra," she said, trying to sound casual. "Dad says she doesn't have any family in town, and he didn't want her to be alone on Thanksgiving." I was speechless. The absolute, mind-boggling nerve of it. To bring his mistress, the woman who was a wrecking ball to our marriage, to my table on a family holiday. It wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration. It was them saying that Sandra wasn't just a dirty little secret anymore. She was being promoted. She was becoming part of the family. "No," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Mom, don't be like that," Brenda started, her tone shifting to one of exasperation. "It's just one dinner. It's the Christian thing to do." "I told you I would not be in the same room as that woman, Brenda," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. "I will not have her in my house, sitting at my table, eating the food I cooked. That is not happening." "This is Dad's house too, Mom," she shot back. "He has a right to invite whomever he wants. I expect you to behave. Behave. Like a naughty child being scolded." After I hung up, I walked into the living room where George was watching TV. You invited her, I said. It wasn't a question. He didn't even turn to look at me. It's just dinner, Helen. Grow up. That was it. That was the moment something inside me finally, irrevocably snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned and walked away. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early. I didn't make a turkey. I didn't prepare any side dishes. I got dressed, went into the kitchen, and made myself a single piece of toast. As the family started to arrive, filling the house with their cheerful chatter, I walked to the garage, got in my car, and left. I drove to a Denny's on the highway. I sat in a booth by myself and ordered their Thanksgiving special. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, all served on a plastic plate. I ate slowly, watching the families around me laughing and talking. I wasn't sad. I was numb. After my meal, I went to a movie theater and watched 3 movies in a row. I didn't even care what they were about. I just needed to be somewhere else. I got home around 11 that night. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room. George was sitting there, waiting for me. The remnants of the feast were still on the dining room table. Where have you been? He demanded, his voice sharp. I went to Denny's for Thanksgiving dinner, I replied calmly, setting my purse down. Then I saw a few movies. He stared at me, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. We had a beautiful meal right here. And you went to Denny's? Why would you do that? I finally looked him straight in the eye. It's not about the food, George, I said, my voice as cold as ice. It's about the company. I told you I would not be in this house at the same time as her. That didn't just mean when she's here for a Tuesday afternoon visit. It meant any time. And you knew that. Yet you did it anyway. He stood up, his face red with anger. I can't believe a woman your age can't be civil to a guest I invited into our home. She is not a guest, I said. She is the woman you are cheating on me with. I picked up the newspaper from the coffee table, opened it, and held it up between us, a flimsy wall that signified the end of the conversation. And the end of everything else. The winter after that disastrous Thanksgiving was long and bleak, both outside and inside our home. The politeness between George and me wore thin, replaced by a brittle silence. We were 2 ships passing in the night, living in the same space but in entirely different worlds. He had his life, which I now knew included not just Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but dinner dates and outings with Sandra. My life consisted of my appointments, my lonely drives, and my secret planning. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Albright, had been very clear. Helen, she'd said, we need to be meticulous. We document everything. We move slowly and quietly. So I did. I started gathering financial statements, deeds, and investment portfolio reports. George had always handled the finances, but I was a quick study. I spent hours at the library, learning about asset division and divorce law. The quiet librarian was becoming a financial strategist. Spring arrived, and with it, Mother's Day. For years, we had a family tradition. The kids would take me out for a fancy brunch at a beautiful French restaurant downtown. By mutual agreement, George didn't come to my Mother's Day brunch, and I didn't go to his Father's Day celebration. It was the kids' day with each parent, and it had always worked for us. This year, however, a dark suspicion took root in my mind. Given what had happened at Thanksgiving, I couldn't shake the feeling that George would see my absence as an opportunity. The day before Mother's Day, Brenda called to confirm. We'll pick you up at 11, Mom. Can't wait, she chirped. Actually, honey, I said, forcing a weak, wavering tone into my voice. I don't think I'm up for it this year. My arthritis is acting up terribly. You all go ahead and have a wonderful time without me. Just give me a call later. There was a pause. Oh. Okay, Mom, Brenda said, a little too quickly. If you're sure. We'll miss you. I knew she was lying. My absence wasn't a disappointment, it was a convenience. On Mother's Day morning, I watched from my bedroom window as Brenda's minivan pulled up, followed by Carl and Janice's car. They all went inside to pick up George. A few minutes later, they all came out, laughing and piling into the cars to head to the restaurant. I waited for 20 minutes. Then, I got into my own car. I didn't dress up. I just wore a simple pair of slacks and a blouse. I drove to the French restaurant. I didn't plan on going inside. I just needed to know. I parked across the street, where I had a clear view of the entrance and the parking lot. I watched as my family arrived. I saw my son, Carl, open the door for my daughter, Brenda. I saw my husband, George, laughing, looking happier than I had seen him in years. And then, another car pulled into the lot. A sporty little red convertible. My breath caught in my throat. Sandra got out of the car. She was wearing a pretty floral dress. She walked over to my family, and my daughter, Brenda, gave her a hug. A warm, welcoming hug. My son-in-law, Frank, smiled and nodded at her. My husband, George, put his arm around her waist and kissed her on the cheek. And then, all together, my entire family, with my husband's mistress in tow, walked into the restaurant to celebrate Mother's Day without me. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The pain in my joints was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. But this pain was different. It wasn't the gut-wrenching grief I felt when I first discovered the affair. It wasn't the humiliated despair I felt during the family intervention. It was a cold, clarifying rage. This was the final betrayal. This was them, all of them, erasing me. They hadn't just replaced me in my husband's bed, they were replacing me at the family table. Any lingering shred of doubt, any thought that maybe this could be fixed, that my family could be saved, vanished in that moment. It was over. All of it. I didn't cry. I simply put the car in drive and drove away. I didn't go to a diner or a movie. I went straight home, walked into my office, and called Ms. Albright. "It's time," I said when she answered. "We're moving forward with the final plan." The year that followed that Mother's Day was the strangest of my life. On the surface, I was the picture of quiet resignation. I became even more accommodating, more docile. I stopped my weekend drives. I started asking George about his day, feigning interest in his tennis matches and poker games. I played the part of the dutiful, if distant, wife. They all bought it. They saw my change in behavior as final acceptance, the last stage of my surrender. My daughter Brenda even commented on it during a phone call. "It's so good to hear you sounding like your old self again, Mom," she'd said. They had no idea that my old self was gone forever, replaced by a woman they didn't know at all. My compliance was a smokescreen. Behind it, I was working with a methodical, silent fury. My life became a series of secret appointments and covert operations. Every other week, I would tell George the first was going to a new water aerobics class for my arthritis. Instead, I would drive to Ms. Albright's office downtown. We spent hours poring over 40 years of financial records. George had been clever. Many of our most valuable assets, our investment portfolios and retirement accounts, were structured in a way that gave him primary control. "He's counting on you not knowing how to touch this," Ms. Albright said, tapping a thick file. "He's underestimating you. We'll use that." We began the painstaking process of untangling our financial lives. On Ms. Albright's advice, I opened a new bank account in my name at a different bank. We started drafting the legal paperwork to liquidate certain joint assets, documents that would require George's signature. I would slip them into a stack of ordinary household bills and tax forms. "Just some routine paperwork from our financial advisor, honey," I'd say casually. He'd scrawl his signature without a second glance, too absorbed in the golf tournament on TV to care. Each signature was a small victory, another brick in the foundation of my new life. During this time, I also did something for myself. I reconnected with an old friend. His name was Arthur. We had worked together years ago, before I retired from the library. He was the head librarian, a kind, gentle man with a quick wit and a deep love for literature. His wife had passed away from cancer a few years before, and I knew he had been lonely. I found his number and called him, on a whim at first, just to hear a friendly voice. We started meeting for coffee. It was innocent. We talked about books, about our old colleagues, about our children. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I wasn't a sick wife or a problem to be managed. I was just Helen. Arthur listened. When I finally found the courage to tell him what was happening in my marriage, he didn't offer platitudes or judgment. He just listened, his eyes full of a deep, compassionate sadness. He held my hand across the table, his touch gentle, and said, "You deserve so much better." Our friendship deepened. He became my confidant, my one source of sanity in a world gone mad. He was the only one who knew about my plan. He didn't question it. He supported it. He saw my strength when everyone else saw only my weakness. As the months passed, my plan took its final shape. I had a new bank account with a substantial sum of money in it. I had a lawyer who was ready to file the divorce papers at a moment's notice. And I had a friend in Arthur, who offered me not a romance, but something far more valuable, a vision of a future where I was not alone, a future where I was respected. I circled the date on my calendar, the 4th of July. Exactly 1 year since my family had sat me down and sentenced me to a life of humiliation. This year, it wouldn't be their day of celebration. It would be my Independence Day. The morning of the 4th of July dawned bright and clear. The air was already thick with the smell of cut grass and the distant pop of early firecrackers. Our backyard slowly filled with the same cast of characters as the year before. Brenda and Frank, Carl and Janice, the grandkids. The grill was fired up, burgers and hot dogs sizzling. The conversation was light, full of laughter. It was a perfect picture of a happy American family. A perfect lie. I played my part flawlessly. I mingled, I smiled, I complimented Brenda on her potato salad. But this year, I made sure to overdo it. I would wince every time I stood up. I'd rub my hands as if they were in agony. I let out a little sigh of exhaustion every now and then. I was planting the seeds for my final performance. Around dusk, as everyone started packing coolers and grabbing lawn chairs for the trip to the park for the fireworks, I found George in the kitchen. "Honey," I said, putting a hand on his arm, my voice laced with manufactured weariness. "I don't think I can make it to the fireworks this year. My joints are just screaming. I think I just need to lie down and get to bed early." He looked at me with a flicker of what I could have sworn was genuine concern. That was the hardest part of all this. Knowing that somewhere, buried deep beneath the selfishness and betrayal, was the man I had once loved, a man who could still feel a shred of care for me. It made what I was about to do even harder, but no less necessary. "Are you sure, Helen?" he asked. "You missed them last year, too." "I'm sure," I said, giving him a weak smile. "I'm just getting old, I guess. You all go have a great time for me." He patted my hand. "Okay, if you're sure. Get some rest." As soon as he left the room, I watched him walk straight over to Brenda, a whispered conversation, a quick nod. I knew exactly what was happening. My absence wasn't a problem, it was an invitation. They were making a space for Sandra. The fresh betrayal, even though I expected it, still stung. One by one, they came to say goodbye, expressing their disappointment that I wasn't coming. I hugged my granddaughters, Joyce and Carol, a little longer than usual. "Be good, my sweet girls," I whispered, my heart aching. This was the one true loss, the one collateral damage of my war that I knew would leave a permanent scar. I stood at the front door and waved as they piled into Brenda's minivan, their laughter floating back to me on the warm evening air. They didn't even look back. The moment the taillights disappeared around the corner, I moved. There was no time for hesitation. My bag, a single suitcase, was already packed and hidden in the back of my closet. I walked through the house one last time. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing but a quiet, resolute calm. In the bedroom, I took off my wedding ring, the simple gold band I had worn for 40 years. I placed it gently on George's pillow. Next to it, I placed a small, nondescript flash drive. I grabbed my purse and my suitcase, walked out to the garage, and got into my car. I didn't look at the house in the rearview mirror. I was already looking forward. A few blocks away, parked on a quiet side street, Arthur was waiting for me in his car. I pulled up behind him, got out, and moved my suitcase into his trunk. I left my own car there, parked legally on the street. They would find it eventually. I slid into the passenger seat of his car, and he reached over and took my hand. "Ready?" he asked, his voice soft. "I'm ready," I said. And together, we drove towards the airport, towards the rest of my life, as the first explosions of the fireworks began to light up the night sky behind us. The family returned home late, around 10:30. I imagine they were flushed with excitement from the fireworks, still buzzing from the holiday cheer. George probably unlocked the door, expecting to find the house dark and me asleep in bed. It was Carl who found it. I learned this later from Janice. George had asked him to check on me, to make sure I was okay. Carl walked into the master bedroom. He didn't find me. He found an empty, perfectly made bed. And on his father's pillow, gleaming under the soft light of the bedside lamp, were two small objects, my wedding ring and a black flash drive. A sense of unease must have rippled through them. This wasn't right. This wasn't part of the plan. They all gathered in the living room, a confused and anxious huddle. Frank, being the most tech-savvy, took the flash drive and plugged it into his laptop. A single video file appeared on the screen. He double-clicked it. The screen was black for a moment, and then my face appeared. I was in a room they didn't recognize, sitting in a comfortable chair. I looked calm. I looked directly into the camera, as if I was looking into each one of their eyes. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "If I've timed this right, you're watching this a little after 10 p.m., just back from the fireworks show." I saw them, in my mind's eye, glance reflexively at the clock. At this very moment, I continued, I am on a plane, flying far beyond the borders of the United States. And in case you're wondering, I won't be coming back. The sound of George's strangled cry of no was something I could only imagine, but I knew it was there. "You betrayed me," the woman on the screen, the new me, said, her voice unwavering. "Each and every one of you. George, my husband of 40 years. A man for whom I built a home, raised a family, and stood by through everything. You threw me aside like a piece of trash for a woman half my age. And when I dared to object, you turned my own children against me. I thought 40 years of loyalty, dedication, and faithfulness would mean something to you. I deserved better than this. Your desires, and let's be honest, they were wants, not needs, should never have taken precedence over my dignity." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before turning my attention to my children. "Brenda, your betrayal hurt just as much as your father's. You were always Mommy's girl. We did everything together. And to know that you not only supported your father in cheating on me but actively encouraged it, that you coached him, and me, on how to accept it, that broke my heart in a way his actions never could." I could picture her, shaking her head, denying it, but the truth was there, on the screen, for her husband to see. "And Carl. You must be one of the most foolish men alive. Did you even realize that by supporting this, you gave your wife, Janice, permission to do the same to you? You told her, with your actions, that if she ever feels her needs aren't being met, she has a green light to seek satisfaction elsewhere. How does that feel, son? I saw Frank looking at Brenda, a new and terrible suspicion dawning in his eyes. I saw Janice staring at Carl, her face pale. I was not just leaving, I was planting seeds of doubt that would grow in the poisoned soil of their betrayal. The family they fought so hard to keep together was already starting to crumble. The video continued, my on-screen self pausing to let the weight of my words sink in. The atmosphere in that living room must have been thick with shock and dawning horror. But I wasn't finished. The emotional blows were just the prelude to the main event. I could not stay in a marriage where I was disrespected weekly, I said, my voice turning colder, more businesslike. And I certainly wasn't going to stick around when I found out it was happening multiple times a week. Oh yes, George, you weren't nearly as discreet as you thought. Inviting her to Mother's Day? That was a special kind of tasteless. I should also mention the financial situation I've left you with. For 40 years, I put this family first. I managed the household, raised the children, and supported George's career, allowing him to accumulate our wealth. I've decided it's time for me to be compensated for my contributions. I leaned forward slightly. George, I've left you the house. As you know, it's fully paid off and worth a considerable amount. My lawyer, Ms. Albright, will be in touch to help you with the sale, should you choose to. I also left you $400,000 in the checking account. I calculated that comes out to $10,000 for every good year you gave me. Unfortunately, there haven't been any good years recently. I let that sink in. A generous settlement, by any standard. But it was what came next that would change everything for them. As for the rest of our assets, I said, my voice dropping slightly, our investment portfolios, our retirement funds, our savings. I took them. With the help of my lawyer, I have secured my half of the marital assets, and then some, as compensation for emotional distress and breach of trust. After everything is settled, I'll be sitting on a portfolio worth nearly 8 figures. I'll be just fine. Though I doubt any of you truly care. The silence in the room must have been absolute. The money. The foundation of their comfortable lives, the source of their security, the future inheritance they all took for granted, was gone. Oh, I added, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. And if you're worried I'll spend my golden years alone, don't be. I already have a companion. And he's sitting right next to me on this plane. I turned to my side, off camera. Arthur, would you say hello? A man's face appeared in the frame. It was Arthur. He looked distinguished and kind, with warm eyes. He smiled gently at the camera. Hello, he said, his voice calm and pleasant. I'm Arthur. I'll be helping Helen spend what could have been your inheritance. He gave a little wave. I turned back to the camera. Josephine, you probably don't remember Arthur, but you've met him several times at library fundraisers. We worked together for over 20 years. He took early retirement to join me at my new home. We've been close friends all this time, and we've been keeping each other company for the past several months, ever since I told him what my husband was doing. And the best part? Arthur's needs are simple. Just affection, respect, and good conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I looked directly into the camera one last time, my gaze holding George's through the screen. I loved you, George. I loved you from the day we met. I looked forward to growing old with you. I am so disappointed that your physical desires ruined that for us. For me. For your sake, I hope it was worth it. Goodbye. And the screen went black. That was the moment. The moment the screen went black, and I knew that, in that living room miles away, my old life had officially ended. My new life, sitting on that plane next to a good man, was just beginning. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a tremendous encouragement, and it gives me the strength to continue. Please, comment with the number 1 and listen to what happened next. The weeks that followed my departure were, as I later learned from Janice, pure chaos. The video had detonated like a bomb in the middle of their comfortable lives, and the fallout was devastating. George, stripped of his wife and the bulk of his fortune in one fell swoop, crumbled. He was a man adrift, lost in a sea of his own making. He called my phone incessantly for days, leaving dozens of voicemails, swinging wildly between rage, disbelief, and pathetic, pleading apologies. I never listened to them. Arthur deleted them for me. The biggest explosion, however, happened in my daughter Brenda's marriage. My words in the video had been a direct hit on the fragile trust between her and Frank. He couldn't look at her without seeing her mother's warning. You gave him a free pass. The accusation hung between them, poisoning the air in their home. They fought constantly. Frank became suspicious and withdrawn. Brenda, faced with the potential loss of her own marriage, became frantic. The practical solution she had so confidently prescribed for my marriage suddenly didn't seem so practical anymore. Carl and Janice were quieter, but the damage was there, too. Janice, who had always been the most hesitant of the group, withdrew from the family. She was pregnant with their first child, my first grandchild, and she wanted no part of the toxicity. She told Carl that until he could understand the profound disrespect they had shown me, she needed space. They were all fractured, broken pieces of a family that had once been whole. They had sacrificed my dignity on the altar of George's desires, and now they were paying the price. About 3 weeks after I left, I decided to make one phone call. I didn't call Brenda or Carl. I called Janice. I knew she was the only one who might have a conscience left. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. Hello? Janice, it's Helen, I said quietly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Oh, Helen. Oh my God. How are you? Where are you? I'm fine, honey. I'm safe, and I'm okay. But I can't tell you where I am right now. How are you? I'm okay, she said, her voice wavering. Dad, George isn't doing well. And Brenda and Frank are having serious problems. She paused. Helen, I have to tell you. I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong from the beginning. I should have spoken up. I was new to the family, I was scared, it's no excuse, but I'm so sorry. I know, Janice, I said, and I meant it. I could see it in your eyes that day. You're forgiven. She started to cry softly. Thank you. That means so much. Especially because I want both grandmothers in my baby's life. I'm pregnant, Helen. The news was a ray of sunshine breaking through the storm clouds. A baby. A new beginning. Oh, honey, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. That's wonderful news. Congratulations. We talked for a while longer. She told me more about the fallout, about the arguments and the tears. Before we hung up, I made a request. Janice, I said. I think I'm ready to talk to them. All of them. Can you arrange a phone call for tomorrow night? But on one condition. Sandra is not to be there. Of course, Helen, she said without hesitation. They'll be there. The next evening, I sat with Arthur in the living room of our new home, a small, beautiful house overlooking the ocean. The phone was on the speaker, the call connected to the living room where my former family was gathered. Hi, Mom. Everyone's here, Janice's voice came through, a little shaky. Thank you, Janice, I said calmly. Just so you all know, Arthur is with me. I want this to be a polite conversation, not an argument. Does everyone agree? A chorus of mumbled agreements came through the speaker. Good, I began. I wanted to wait until some time had passed before we spoke. I paused, then addressed my son. Carl, congratulations on the baby. I mean that. Thanks, Mom, he said, his voice subdued. I'll try to be the kind of father you taught me to be. The best thing you can do for your children is to love their mother, I said gently. Remember that. Then, it was George's turn. Helen, honey, please, he began, his voice cracking. Please come back. We can fix this. I'll end it with Sandra. I swear. If you had just told me you were really going to leave. I did tell you, George, I interrupted, my voice firm but not unkind. I told you I wouldn't accept this. But you didn't listen. You chose your affair over our marriage. You invited her into our family. There is no fixing this. From the moment you chose her over me, our marriage was over. I'm so sorry, but it's done. I could hear him start to sob, a broken, helpless sound. What about your commitment to me? He choked out. You made that commitment first. Yes, I did, I replied. And I would still be honoring it if you hadn't broken yours. When you did that, you freed me from my commitment. And you gave me the chance to make a new one, which I have, with Arthur. There is no turning back. A heavy silence fell, broken only by George's weeping. Then, Brenda spoke up, her voice cold with anger. Nice, Mom. Did you call just to hurt Dad more? All because your ego couldn't handle another woman making him feel good? Is that really how you see it, Brenda? I asked calmly. Let me ask your husband a question. Frank, how's your ego? Is it ready to accept another man making your wife feel better than you do? Silence. The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Finally, Frank's voice, tight and strained, came through the speaker. For what it's worth, Helen, after all of this, Brenda and I have been having serious issues. I understand, I replied. But let me tell you both this. Fight for your marriage. You love each other, but you've started taking that for granted. Let this be a wake-up call, not the end. Remember you're a team. I never meant for this to happen, Mom, Brenda whispered, her anger gone, replaced by the terrified voice of a little girl. I'm scared. I know, I said softly. But you can fix this. Put the time you used to spend managing my marriage back into your own. You're his partner, Brenda, not his boss. Be honest with him. That's all you can do. There was another long silence. The call had run its course. The things that needed to be said had been said. It's too late for us, honey, I said, my voice gentle, a final farewell to my daughter. But it's not too late for you. I let Arthur disconnect the call. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the large window at the ocean, the waves rolling in and out, steady and eternal. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. A chapter of my life, a long and painful one, was finally, truly over. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. I felt peace. The screen remains on the peaceful ocean view. The narrator's voice returns, soft and reflective. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it was important. If you've ever been through something similar, or if my journey has touched you in any way, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Reading your stories and knowing I'm not alone means the world to me. Please take care of yourselves, and know that no matter how dark it gets, there is always a new sunrise waiting. Goodbye for now. Gentle instrumental music fades back in as the video ends.